Most people work their entire lives building income. The ultra-wealthy? They're building something entirely different. They're building empires that will generate wealth long after they're gone. And here's what nobody tells you: the psychological shift required to move from earning to empire building is more important than the capital itself. I'm William Vanderbilt, and over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how the richest families on earth think about wealth, legacy, and generational power. This isn't theory. These are the documented strategies of families worth hundreds of billions of dollars. And by the end of this, you'll understand why most wealth disappears within 3 generations, and how the elite ensure theirs doesn't. Before we go any further, let me be direct with you. This is a brand new channel, and we're building something special here. Real wealth insights. No fluff, no generic advice. We're aiming for our first 100 subscribers, and I want you to be part of this from the beginning. Hit that subscribe button right now. We're also going for 50 likes on this video. If this content is already shifting how you think about money, tap that like button. And here's something I'm genuinely curious about. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know where in the world this message is reaching. Are you in New York, London, Singapore, Mumbai? Drop a comment. Let's build this community together. Now let's get into it. Here's the fundamental truth that separates the poor, the middle class, and the truly wealthy. It all comes down to a single psychological pivot: the difference between earning and owning. Poor and middle-class individuals trade time for money. They receive paychecks. They must continue working to maintain their income. Stop working, stop earning. The wealthy operate on a completely different system. They build asset portfolios that generate income independent of their effort. This isn't just a financial distinction, it's a fundamentally different relationship with capital and time itself. Let me show you what this means in practice. Consider the tax implications alone. Earners, people who derive income from salaries, from providing services, they lose between 20 and 50% of their gains every single year to income taxes. A person earning $100,000 annually might take home just $50,000 after taxes. Half their labor gone. Now contrast that with owners, people who generate wealth through capital gains, through real estate appreciation, through asset growth. They benefit from tax-deferred compounding. Their wealth grows inside structures that shield it from immediate taxation. Warren Buffett has demonstrated this for decades. He's famously pointed out that his effective tax rate is lower than his secretary's. How? Because his wealth doesn't come from a salary. It comes from appreciating assets. And here's where it gets even more sophisticated. When billionaires like Jeff Bezos utilize what's known as the buy, borrow, die strategy, they're operating on a completely different level. Here's how it works. They take out loans secured against their appreciating assets, stocks, real estate, business equity, and they live off those loans. Those loans aren't taxable income. The assets continue appreciating. When they eventually die, their heirs inherit those assets with a stepped-up basis, meaning the capital gains taxes are essentially erased. Dynastic wealth, built without ever triggering the massive tax events that destroy middle-class fortunes. But here's what most people miss. The psychological consequence of this shift matters even more than the tax advantage. The wealthy think in multi-generational arcs. While an earner worries about next month's mortgage payment, an owner is contemplating how their investments will compound over 50 years and benefit their grandchildren. This isn't greed. It's a completely different time horizon. It's a different way of perceiving reality itself. Let me give you a real example. John D. Rockefeller, in today's dollars, amassed over $400 billion. $400 billion. He didn't just accumulate wealth, he systematized its preservation. He established family trusts with clear principles. The trust functions like a family bank. Assets aren't simply handed out to heirs, because that leads to waste and family conflict. Instead, family members can apply to borrow from the trust for productive purposes, starting a business, investing in real estate, funding education. This structure accomplishes 2 critical things. First, it keeps assets together, preventing dilution across generations. Second, it creates built-in accountability. Borrowers must present a plan. They must justify the deployment of capital. This ensures funds are used productively, not squandered on yachts and mansions. And here's the result. Over 6 generations, Rockefeller wealth has not only survived, it's grown. That's extraordinarily rare. Most family fortunes evaporate within 3 generations. The Williams Group conducted a 20-year study of over 3,000 wealthy families and found that 70% of families lose their wealth by the 2nd generation, 90% by the 3rd. And here's the key insight. It's typically not because of market downturns or bad investments. It's because of lack of preparation, lack of governance, lack of documented principles. The money disappears because the next generation doesn't understand the system that created it. Now, contrast the Rockefellers with the Vanderbilt family. Yes, my namesake. The Vanderbilts accumulated enormous wealth. Cornelius Vanderbilt built a shipping and railroad empire in the 19th century. At one point, the Vanderbilts were the wealthiest family in America. But they made a critical mistake. They invested heavily in non-productive luxury assets, yachts, mansions, art collections that generated no cash flow, beautiful, impressive, status-affirming, but financially sterile. The Vanderbilts lost their fortune within 48 years. 48 years from the wealthiest family in America to broke. Meanwhile, the Rockefellers, who prioritized income-producing assets, commercial buildings, businesses, oil infrastructure, have sustained their wealth for over a century. That's the first pillar of empire building. Shift from earning to owning through income-producing assets. Not assets that look impressive, assets that generate cash flow. Let me break down what this looks like in practice. Commercial real estate has historically been one of the most reliable vehicles for generational wealth. Why? Because properties generate consistent rental income. They appreciate over time, and they provide significant tax advantages through depreciation deductions. The wealthy understand that real estate isn't speculative. It's a cash flow engine. A $10 million commercial property generating 8% annually produces $800,000 in income. That $800,000 can be reinvested, compounded, leveraged to acquire more properties. That's how empires scale. The Walton family, heirs to Walmart, demonstrate this principle at massive scale. Sam Walton founded Walmart in 1962 with a simple obsession: provide value to customers through low prices and operational efficiency. He wasn't trying to build the fanciest stores. He was trying to build the most efficient system. He would wake at dawn to visit competitor stores, analyzing their pricing, their merchandising, their operations. He'd fly his small plane over competitor locations to estimate foot traffic. This wasn't routine business practice. This was founder-level paranoia about losing his edge. After Walton's death in 1992, his family faced the transition that destroys most family-owned businesses. But the Waltons avoided this trap. How? By establishing clear governance structures and maintaining significant ownership stakes. They retained approximately 45% ownership of Walmart. That ownership stake ensured they remained aligned with the company's long-term vision, not short-term stock fluctuations. Today, Walmart operates over 10,500 stores across 19 countries, serving 240 million customers every single week. The Walton family's collective wealth exceeds $432 billion. $432 billion. That makes them the richest family on earth. And they maintain this wealth through disciplined shareholding and reinvestment. They didn't sell out. They didn't cash in. They built an empire and held on to it. Now, if you're starting to see how different this mindset is from how most people think about money, do me a favor. Leave a comment right now with your biggest takeaway so far. What's the one insight that's hitting differently for you? Is it the difference between earning and owning? The multi-generational thinking, the tax strategies? Drop a comment. I read every single one, and your insights help shape the content we create next. Let's talk about the second pillar of empire building. Build moats. Brands, intellectual property, systems that survive you. Successful empires recognize that the business must outlive the founder. Steve Jobs understood this at a profound level. Apple's strategy under Jobs wasn't just to create products. It was to build comprehensive intellectual property protections around every element of those products. Before the iPhone's release, Apple filed patents not just for the core technology, but for the user interface, The scrolling mechanism, the physical design, every single layer that competitors might try to copy. This wasn't paranoia. This was strategic foresight. Jobs understood that Apple's competitive advantage wasn't any single innovation. It was the ecosystem of interconnected intellectual property that made the company nearly impossible to replicate. When Android emerged, Jobs didn't just see a competitor. He saw his life's work being stolen. And he marshaled Apple's legal and financial resources to defend that intellectual property with absolute ferocity. Today, decades after Jobs' death, Apple's IP portfolio remains one of its greatest assets. The company continues to generate hundreds of billions in revenue because Jobs built systems and protections that outlasted him. Here's another example: Bernard Arnault and LVMH. Arnault took a completely different path than Sam Walton, but the empire-building principles are identical. Rather than building a single business from scratch, Arnault recognized an inefficiency in the luxury sector. Prestigious brands with incredible heritage were being poorly managed as businesses. In 1984, he acquired Boussac Saint Frère, a failing textile conglomerate that owned Christian Dior and Le Bon Marché. He stripped away the unprofitable operations and held on to Dior. Why? Because he recognized that luxury brands with strong heritage appreciate dramatically when professionally managed. By the late 1980s, LVMH was plagued by internal disputes between founders. Arnault executed a disciplined takeover, gaining control and establishing clear operational standards across all brands while preserving each brand's creative autonomy. This balance, central financial discipline with creative independence, became LVMH's formula for empire building. The company now owns over 75 luxury brands: Louis Vuitton, Dior, Givenchy, Celine, Fendi, Bulgari, Tag Heuer, Moet and Chandon. Dom Perignon, I could go on. LVMH generates annual revenues exceeding $80 billion. The Arnault family's wealth is approximately $230 billion, making Bernard Arnault one of the wealthiest individuals on the planet. Here's the critical insight. Arnault didn't build Dior, he didn't build Givenchy, he didn't build most of these brands. He inherited them or acquired them. His genius was recognizing that luxury brands, unlike commodities, appreciate in value when managed as cultural institutions rather than pure profit maximization vehicles. He created systems to preserve brand heritage while extracting financial returns. That's empire building. You're not just managing businesses, you're stewarding cultural assets that will compound in value for generations. The Chanel family took this even further. By keeping Chanel private, the company remains free from quarterly earnings pressures. Public companies are constantly optimizing for the next quarter's results. Private companies can pursue long-term aesthetic and cultural goals. The Wertheimer family, Chanel's principal shareholders, have preserved and enhanced an $88 billion fortune through disciplined brand stewardship. They're not trying to maximize revenue every single quarter. They're trying to ensure that Chanel remains culturally relevant and desirable for the next 100 years. That's the moat: a business model, a brand, an intellectual property portfolio that competitors can't easily replicate and that will generate returns long after you're gone. The third pillar: build systems that scale beyond the founder. Jeff Bezos understood this from the very beginning with Amazon. He didn't just build a retail company. He built a platform, a system that could function and evolve without him personally executing every decision. And here's what most people don't realize. In 2005, Bezos established Bezos Expeditions, his family office, to manage and grow his personal wealth separately from his operational role at Amazon. This separation is absolutely crucial. It allows Bezos to pursue long-term strategic interests: Blue Origin, his space exploration company, the Washington Post, venture capital investments, without those requiring his day-to-day involvement at Amazon. When Bezos stepped down as Amazon's CEO in 2021, the company didn't collapse. It didn't even stumble. Why? Because he'd built systems, not dependencies. He'd established clear principles, autonomous decision-making frameworks, and empowered leadership teams. Amazon operates because of its systems, not because of any single individual. Warren Buffett did the same thing with Berkshire Hathaway. Buffett structured Berkshire as a decentralized ecosystem of independent businesses, each led by strong managers whom he trusted implicitly. Rather than centralizing control at headquarters, Buffett built a system based on clear principles and long-term thinking. Here's an astonishing fact. Berkshire Hathaway has fewer than 30 people at its corporate headquarters, yet it manages a portfolio worth over $1 trillion. Think about that. 30 people. $1 trillion enterprise. That's the opposite of a founder-dependent business. Berkshire is designed to function without Buffett. His eventual succession has been relatively smooth precisely because he prepared for it decades in advance. Greg Abel, Ajit Jain, Todd Combs, Ted Weschler. These individuals have been empowered to make decisions, manage capital, and lead divisions independently. Buffett didn't build a company dependent on his genius. He built a system that institutionalized his principles. And if you're serious about building wealth, about moving beyond just earning a paycheck, you need to understand these systems. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because next week I'm breaking down the exact frameworks wealthy families use to structure their investments, their trusts, and their governance systems. You don't want to miss that. The fourth pillar of empire building: document your principles and create a family operating manual. This is one of the most underutilized tools in wealth preservation. Buffett's annual shareholder letters are more than financial updates. They're a public operating manual. In those letters, he articulates not just what Berkshire did, but why. The principles and values that guide every decision. Future leaders at Berkshire can read decades of Buffett's thinking and understand the decision-making framework. Forward-thinking wealthy families take this even further. They create family constitutions, written documents that articulate core values, governance structures, and decision-making frameworks. A family constitution isn't a legal document like a will or a trust. It's a philosophical and operational guide that outlines how the family makes decisions, what values they prioritize, and how they want to steward their wealth across generations. The Rockefeller family created one of the earliest and most sophisticated family constitutions. This document, coupled with their trust structure, ensured that each generation understood not just the mechanics of wealth, how to manage investments, but the philosophy, what the wealth was for, what responsibilities came with it, what values must be upheld. This isn't about control, it's about continuity. It's about ensuring that the principles that built the fortune don't get lost when the founder is gone. For operating businesses, wealthy families develop detailed operations manuals that document processes, policies, and decision-making procedures. This ensures that when leadership transitions occur, when a founder steps back or passes away, the system doesn't collapse, the knowledge doesn't disappear. Disney, before its recent succession challenges, attempted to document Walt Disney's creative philosophy and decision-making processes to ensure continuity. The challenge, of course, is that many succession attempts fail precisely because the founder's knowledge and intuition were never properly codified. It remained implicit, locked in their mind, and when they left, it left with them. Let me give you another real-world example of these principles in action. Bill Gates built Microsoft with Paul Allen, then transitioned to wealth preservation and strategic deployment. In 1994, Gates established Cascade Investments, his family office, to manage and grow his wealth beyond Microsoft. Cascade's strategy reveals Gates' thinking about legacy and empire building. The office focuses on diversification across sectors: energy, hospitality, agriculture, transportation, with geographic exposure and a long-term return horizon. Cascade maintains approximately 60% of its portfolio in equities across various industries. Compare that to the average North American family office, which holds only 32% in equities. Gates is significantly more concentrated in growth assets, reflecting his conviction that wealth should be actively deployed, not passively preserved. Additionally, Gates has channeled billions into the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, directing resources toward global health, education, and development. Unlike pure wealth transfer to heirs, Gates has embedded his values and principles into a foundation that will operate long after his death. That's a legacy of impact, not just money. Now let's talk about the psychology that underlies all of this. Because here's what separates empire builders from everyone else. They think about ownership and control differently. When wealthy entrepreneurs discuss setbacks, they don't blame external circumstances. They don't blame competitors or bad luck or market conditions. They assume personal responsibility. They ask, what did I misread about the market? What could I have done differently? What systems failed? This ownership mindset, taking responsibility rather than playing victim, is the psychological bedrock of long-term wealth building. The wealthy also make decisions differently. In studies of ultra-high net worth individuals, researchers found that the majority explained their decisions were based far more on gut feeling than rigorous analysis. Even those who emphasized analytical approaches still relied on gut instinct for 20 to 40% of major decisions. Why? Because after decades of pattern recognition, their intuition is trained. It's not random. It's the accumulation of thousands of experiences compressed into an instant judgment. But here's the most important distinction. The wealthy see time as leverage differently than everyone else. The poor trade time for money. Work an hour, get paid for an hour. The middle class trade time for career advancement. Work hard now, get promoted later, earn more eventually. But the wealthy? They trade systems and value for money. They automate, they delegate, they scale. A doctor earning $300,000 annually is still trading time for money. Stop working, stop earning. A real estate investor earning $300,000 annually from rental properties, that's passive income. That's wealth that compounds whether they show up or not. That fundamental distinction is the birthplace of empire. And here's something critical that most people never consider. The wealthiest families that sustain wealth across multiple generations understand that wealth isn't just financial capital. They think in terms of 5 distinct forms of capital, and they develop all 5 simultaneously. First, financial capital. That's the obvious one. Monetary assets, investments, tangible wealth. Most people focus exclusively on this. They look at the bank balance and think that's the whole picture. Second, human capital. Knowledge, skills, health, education, the capabilities of family members. Buffett has repeatedly emphasized this as the most important form of capital. He says, the best investment you can make is in yourself. Whatever you invest in yourself, no one can take it away from you. If you develop skills, knowledge, character, those are assets that compound forever. Third, intellectual capital, collective wisdom, decision-making frameworks, problem-solving approaches. This is where family constitutions and operating manuals become essential. It's not enough to have smart people. You need to capture and transfer their knowledge across generations. Fourth, social capital, networks, relationships, reputation, influence cultivated over time. The Sassoon family, originally from Baghdad, built enormous wealth by maintaining commercial and diplomatic networks from the Middle East to Shanghai. They survived wars, revolutions, regime changes, because their social capital transcended any single geography or political system. Fifth, spiritual capital. Values, purpose, meaning, ethical frameworks that guide decision-making. Families that sustain wealth across generations have clear, deeply held values that each generation internalizes. They're not just passing down money. They're passing down a philosophy of life. Families that focus exclusively on financial capital without developing the other 4 forms almost always lose their wealth within 3 generations. That's the lesson of the Vanderbilts. Enormous financial capital, but no governance structures, no human capital development, no shared values. The money dissipated within 48 years. Now here's where I want to hear from you. What's your biggest challenge right now when it comes to building wealth? Is it mindset? Is it not knowing where to start? Is it feeling trapped in the time for money cycle? Drop a comment and let me know. Because understanding where you are right now is the first step to breaking through to the next level. Let me give you one more case study that ties all of this together. Warren Buffett's approach to succession reveals his true philosophy about legacy. Unlike most billionaires, Buffett has pledged to donate more than 99% of his $120 billion fortune to philanthropy. He's not creating a family dynasty in the traditional sense. He refused to give his children massive inheritances, believing that inherited wealth creates dependency rather than capability. But his approach to Berkshire Hathaway's succession tells the real story. Rather than anointing a single successor, Buffett gradually empowered a team: Greg Abel, Ajit Jain, Todd Combs, Ted Weschler, each excelling in different domains. The company operates on documented principles, clear values, and decentralized autonomy. Buffett's greatest legacy won't be the $120 billion transferred to charity. It will be Berkshire Hathaway itself, an institution designed to function independently of its founder, generating returns and shaping capital allocation for generations. So what's the core psychological shift that separates empire builders from everyone else? It comes down to this: thinking in terms of systems and legacy rather than personal achievement and current income. A person with an employee mindset builds a career. A person with an ownership mindset builds a machine that generates returns independent of their presence. A person with an empire mindset builds a system that survives them and benefits future generations they will never meet. And here's the critical insight: you don't need billions of dollars to start thinking this way. The empire mindset begins with 5 fundamental decisions. First, acquire productive assets rather than consume. Buy income-producing real estate instead of luxury cars. Invest in businesses and equity instead of pursuing status consumption. Every dollar you spend on things that don't generate returns is a dollar that won't compound for your children and grandchildren. Second, document your principles. Write down what you believe, how you make decisions, what values matter to you. This transforms implicit knowledge into teachable frameworks. Your children, your business partners, your successors, they need to understand not just what you did, but why you did it. Third, build systems that don't depend on you. Hire good people, delegate authority, create clear processes. A business that requires your constant involvement isn't an asset, it's a job. If you can't step away for a month without everything collapsing, you haven't built a system. You've built a dependency. Fourth, think in decades, not quarters. Wealthy empires are built on 20 to 50-year time horizons. Every decision is evaluated for long-term compounding, not immediate returns. When you're choosing between an investment that pays off next year versus one that compounds over 20 years, the wealthy choose the latter every single time. Fifth, separate operational involvement from capital ownership. Like Bezos with Amazon and Blue Origin, or Buffett with Berkshire's decentralized structure, the most sophisticated wealth builders maintain investment oversight while removing themselves from operational dependency. They own the assets. They don't run them day to day. Let me give you the ultimate framework for thinking about this. The wealthiest families understand that generational thinking is a strategic advantage. It's not about greed or accumulation for its own sake. It's about recognizing that generational wealth allows families to pursue long-term impact. Whether that's philanthropy like the Gates family, innovation like Bezos' space exploration, retail dominance like the Waltons' stewardship of Walmart, or cultural preservation like the luxury family's brand management. The empire builders documented throughout history, from the Medici family's banking networks in Renaissance Florence, to the Rothschilds' international financial system, to modern titans like Buffett, Gates, Bezos, and Arnault, they all share one characteristic: they thought beyond their lifetime. They built systems, documented principles, developed people, and cultivated institutions that would thrive after they were gone. That is the empire mindset, not the pursuit of wealth for consumption, the construction of systems for legacy. Now let me bring this home with something practical. If you're watching this and thinking, this is incredible information, but where do I actually start? Here's your first move: start documenting. Tonight, this week, start writing down your financial principles. What are you trying to build? Why does it matter? What values guide your decisions? Who are you building this for? What do you want your legacy to be? That document, even if it's just a few pages right now, is the beginning of your family operating manual. It's the seed of your empire. Because here's the truth: every massive fortune, every multi-generational dynasty, every empire that's lasted centuries, they all started with someone making a decision to think differently, to build differently, to operate on a longer time horizon than everyone around them. You don't need to be born wealthy. John D. Rockefeller wasn't. Sam Walton wasn't. Jeff Bezos wasn't. What they had was a mindset shift. They stopped thinking about earning and started thinking about owning. They stopped thinking about this year and started thinking about the next 50 years. They stopped building jobs and started building systems. And if you're ready to make that shift, if you're ready to start thinking like an empire builder, then you need to be part of this community. Remember, we're building something special here. We're going for 100 subscribers, and I want you to be one of the first. Hit that subscribe button right now. Tap the like button. We're aiming for 50 likes on this video, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know where in the world this message is resonating. New York, London, Dubai, São Paulo, Lagos. Let me know, because here's the reality. The information I'm sharing isn't available in most places. This isn't generic financial advice. These are the documented strategies of the wealthiest families on earth. The Rockefellers, the Waltons, LVMH, Berkshire Hathaway. These are systems that have been proven over decades and generations, and you're getting access to them right now. Next week, I'm going deeper into the specific trust structures and investment vehicles the ultra-wealthy use to protect and compound their assets. The exact frameworks they use to minimize taxes, maximize growth, and ensure their wealth survives for generations. You do not want to miss that video. So make sure you're subscribed, because that content is going to be a game changer. The empire mindset isn't complicated. It's a shift in perspective, from earning to owning, from quarters to decades, from personal achievement to generational legacy. The wealthiest people on earth aren't smarter than you. They're not working harder than you. They're thinking differently than you. They're playing a different game with different rules on a different timeline. And the moment you understand that, the moment you internalize that shift, everything changes. Your decisions change. Your priorities change. What you spend money on changes. How you invest your time changes. Because you're no longer optimizing for this year's income. You're building systems that will generate wealth for your children's children. That's the empire mindset. That's how the rich build legacies, not income. And now you know exactly how they do it. Subscribe, like, comment, and I'll see you in the next one.